I got to kick this thing off. Can I kick it off? 1, 2, 3, 4. Ladies and gentlemen, listen.
What's up, everybody? It's your boy Marby, and you are listening to another episode of the Man Listen Show. Before we get started, let's hear a few words from our sponsors.
DD's Daiquiris is your #1 supplier of premium daiquiri mixes. You will love the taste of our classic margarita and signature strawberry mixes. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at DD's Daiquiris. DD is spelled DEEDEE. You can also find us at www.dd'sdaiquiris.com. DD's Daiquiris, giving good vibes to good people, one good drink at a time.
Please buy the new book by Erika Nicole Moore, Diabolical Tales of Woe. Diabolical Tales of Woe is a thrilling collection of short horror stories that leave you in an excited trepidation to see what will happen next. Prepare to face one horrific encounter after the next in this captivating novel. You can find this book on Amazon in the Kindle and paperback version. That is Diabolical Tales of Woe by Erika Nicole Moore. Are you in the state of Texas and looking for a knowledgeable loan advisor that will walk you through the process from application to closing? Well, then you need to contact Joe Byers at Trinity Oaks Mortgage. Trinity Oaks Mortgage offers FHA, VA, and conventional loans. They also have a first-time homebuyers program available. There is also down payment assistance available as well. Make sure you contact Joe Byers at Trinity Oaks Mortgage. You can reach Joe at 972-512-8990. Are you looking for a virtual assistant who can help you with your scheduling, travel, research, and expenses? Demi Virtual Solutions is the answer for you. Demi Virtual Solutions also provides mobile notary services. They will travel to take care of your needs. So if you are in the Dallas-Fort Worth area and need a virtual assistant or are looking for mobile notary services, contact them at 469-522-9005, and you can find them on their website at demivirtualsolutions.com. That's DEMI virtualsolutions.com.
More Grace Counseling and Mediation Services offers individual and relationship counseling as well as mediation services to the community. At More Grace, healthy partnerships are valuable and beneficial. Please visit the website www.moregracecounseling.com for more information about our approach to counseling. More Grace Counseling and Mediation Services, where we offer more grace and more healing.
Conversate with Us Radio presents the Man Listen Show. We are the blackest radio show on the internet. We bring you our opinion on topics that affect the Black community in an effort to enlighten, enrich, and empower every brother and sister that falls under the sound of our voice. We operate on a no-hating frequency, so be prepared for us to keep it 100% real and 100% Black all the time. Please follow us on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, give us a thumbs up to all the shows that you watch, and let everybody know about the Man Listen Show. Use the hashtag ManListen. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Man Listen Show. Make sure you follow us to keep up with the blackest radio show on the internet. I'm your host, Marby. Let's go ahead and bring in the crew. So on today's episode, we have one of my favorite guests, Kristina Jones, the owner of More Grace Counseling. Kristina, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
So I appreciate you coming on the show. We always love having you. And I thought about having you back on the show because everybody knows, like a couple weeks ago, we had this real big freeze across the country. And I live in Texas, so it really hit Texas hard. And I live in North Texas, so we weren't hit as hard as Houston and San Antonio. But I have a ton of family that's in Houston, family and friends down south, and they were without power, without water. And we were here in North Dallas, so we had rolling blackouts and, diminished water pressure. So it was inconvenient, but we were okay. But there was this whole survivor's remorse where you felt like, you know, I feel guilty because I'm okay
Mm.
and my people aren't. And it just made me think about this whole pandemic and what we've been dealing with for this last year or so. And I know people have been dealing with a lot of stuff. So I wanted to have you back on the show because I think it's good that we talk about it because there's just a lot of stuff going on that people are dealing with.
You're right. It's been very heavy. It's been incredibly stressful. For many of us, it's been really traumatic. I know I've been just personally reflecting on how it has affected me. And I don't think anyone has, come out where we're not really on the other side yet. We're kind of getting there, but I don't think anybody can say that they'll come out on the other side not having been adversely affected by this. So I think it's a good conversation for us to keep having.
So in your position, what have you seen with the families that you talk to? Like, how has this been affecting, you know, families? Because, you know, for the Black community, the family dynamic is important. It's extremely important. And I know, you know, you deal with families who are in crisis, who are undergoing trauma or just need help in general. So what have you been seeing since the pandemic has been going on?
To be honest, what I have seen, and all of my clients that I'm currently serving are Black. They identify as Black or African American. And the biggest presenting issue has been a lot of the racial unrest. Obviously, there's a lot that's hit us with the pandemic, but I think one of the biggest things that's impacted Black people by far, since we've been kind of held hostage in our homes, even people who've been essential, they've had to go to work, but then you really can't just move around and live your life the way that you normally would. And so we're at home, we're watching TV, we're doing a lot of social media engagement, and there's so much just overwhelming, news and things like that just in our faces. And much of what we were watching was about protests, you know, things that aren't new to us, the racial unrest and the mistreatment of Black people by the police and things like that, not new to us at all. But it's a completely different story when you can't just live your life and distract yourself with things the way that we typically, the coping mechanisms that we might normally use to maybe not get down by the really trash realities of police brutality and things like that. And it's just in your face, like just you can't escape it. It's heartbreaking, it's heart wrenching. And so the common thread that I've seen from my Black clients has been just the stress of that and having to process that, deal with their feelings about that while still being in white spaces, while still trying to show up to work, be their most productive selves, while still trying to interact with white people and white society and not be mad, not want to blow the spot up, things like that. Um, that's been common. That's been very common that I've been getting, from clients that are dealing with a variety of things, but since they're all Black, the thing that they really have in common is the stress of dealing with racism. And it nothing new, but it's just coming at us in a new way. And we haven't really, I don't think, dealt with just, it being just right in front of everybody's face. And then also the way that white people have been responding to it is a little bit different. And this white realization of like, oh my God, has this really been happening like this the whole time? And we like, yeah. And so anyway, I think that's been the common experience that I've been processing with my Black clients throughout the pandemic. And I haven't taken a break. I still work full time, and then I have clients on the side, and have worked with my clients throughout the entire pandemic. So that's been just an ongoing thing that we've been having to process. It's all the feelings related to that.
So what are you doing to take care of yourself though? Because, you know, you talk about people having a hard time dealing with it. And
Mm-hmm.
I guess when I talked about that survivor's remorse, you know, I tell people I'm an empath. So when something bad happens to one of my people or somebody I care about, it sticks to me. I can't shake it. I always, want to do something to relieve what they're going through or to try to help them. And there's times when I have to block it off. I have to tell people, look, I can't answer the phone. I can't talk because right now I just don't have the capacity to do it.
Yeah.
So, but for you, it's your job. So what do you do to take care of yourself?
Well, so it is extremely critical, and it was critical before the pandemic for me to have a plan to take care of myself. Being in this profession, therapists have to have a built-in self-care plan that's ongoing, just all the time. Um, Currently, I'm not seeing a therapist, but I have, like, throughout my career as a therapist. I've always had a list of good therapists that I will tap into when I need to do so. Um, so that's one self-care strategy, is that I know when I need outside help, and then I seek that out. I make sure that I have someone that I can start to talk to on a regular basis when I need to do that for myself. I also create a really strong support system. You all have that, and I know this probably will resonate with you. Like, doing this show serves, I'm sure, in many ways as a support system to you all. You all get on here and you keep it real, you all talk to each other. And in that, I'm sure you all provide a lot of comfort and reflection and accountability for each other. And so I build that in to how I live my life. And um, I have supervision, which is a clinical term where I have someone who has a lot of clinical experience where I go to them and process my tough cases. So when I have a really tough client case, I can't talk to my husband about it. I can't talk to my friends about it. I have to confide in another clinician that I trust, and then I can kind of process through how I'm working with that client, or if they're triggering me, or whatever. That's a big part of my self care. Lots of things that go on with my Black clients resonate with me, and many times I have to then, because I have to just show up 100% for them. When we're in the session, that time is 100% about them. And whether I'm triggered or not, my stuff can't be on the table with theirs. So I just make sure that I bring my stuff to the appropriate, setting. And then I do other things to try to take care of myself, you know, particularly with this racial trauma that we're collectively experiencing. But before the pandemic, I had kind of some plans about what I wanted to do with that. And it would just be my way of processing through it. I wanted to find and come up with some methods of working with Black people that are effective for just treating racial trauma. And I'm still working on that. Um, but one of the things I decided to do was go back to school. And through the process of research and writing a dissertation, I'm actually focusing on that academically. So not only am I going to work on that as a clinical tool, but I'm going to write about it, I'm going to research it, I'm going to publish it, I'm going to make it something that is substantial, so that not only can I do it, but other clinicians, Black clinicians, or clinicians who work with Black people, um, can be effective in working with them around their racial trauma. So, some goal setting, working on some, building some different avenues and plans to really help our people as a collective has been part of my self-care plan too. Like, it's one thing to feel like, I just want to do something.
Yeah.
And then when you actually can put it into action and figure out how can I do something? How can I mobilize around this? That has surprisingly made me feel a lot of relief. It actually has, it's new work that I got to do, but it feels good. It's good work.
And you're right. This is somewhat cathartic for all of us because we can process and you know talk to each other and share similar thoughts on current events. And it has been, the Man Listen Show has been a blessing to us, and I think to our listeners as well.
One of the things that I've been trying to do lately, well, not lately, because this has been a crazy week, but previously, I started trying to apply the concept of pay yourself first. So when you think of it in financial terms of saving, you're always supposed to pay yourself first, and then you'll make do whatever's left. Because if you try to pay yourself last or put some money away last, it'll never happen. And so I tried to apply that concept to my self-care. And so getting up at 5 a.m. and getting in a run, some alone time, even just reading or meditating or something, I try to take my time for my self-care first thing in the morning so I'm not too exhausted to do it at the end of the day. And I know that like throughout this past year, people have been like trying to come up with new ways to deal with the stress and pressures of what's going on. Have you thought of any new creative ways over the past year that you've advised people to kind of pay themselves first or make sure that they make time to get their self-care done?
You know, first, let me just applaud you. I think that is so dope. Just that you've thought outside the box to figure out how to feed yourself and give yourself what you need. Um, you know, that has been part of my work with people throughout the pandemic is to figure out, you know, what specific, you know, self-care is, you know, it's this huge big thing and it can be really ambiguous and gray. But when you're trying to help somebody come up with a self-care plan, it's important to figure out what really feeds the individual person you're talking to. So like, you know, as you were talking and you said, you know, I get up at 5 and I get a run in, I think that's super dope. I am not a morning person. So, you know, when you're talking about personalizing it with people, you have to figure out when are the best times of day for you, you know, what is it that you really enjoy? And so with my clients, it's been spending time listening to the things and asking them, you know, what is it that recharges you? When do you feel the most connected to yourself? When do you have that, man, I just came home internally feeling, you know, that just really filled me up. So just trying to dig into that with people, listening to what their schedule is like to help them figure out where they have little windows where they can do things for themselves, listening to people's what they have in terms of resources, and try to make their self-care plan realistic. Like what can you realistically do? Not just what sounds good. You know, like we can come up with something that sounds really great, but like what will you really be able to accomplish with your schedule, with what resources you have on hand and things like that. So I've done that, but there hasn't been one creative thing that I've, you know, suggested for everybody. It's been more of a personalized things with my clients.
No, my question was more kind of like an opinion, you know. I mean, I guess, you know, but so, you know, with the pandemic and everybody's been kind of quarantined or locked down with certain group of people, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times for some people it's their spouse. And so some people it enhanced the relationship, some people it caused a strain.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, we're all trying to get back to normal. Do you think those relationships will ever get back to how they were before, or this is something that, you know, is kind of like this isn't the real relationship, you know? But I think a lot of people are making decisions on what's happening now, but not factoring in the whole relationship up to that point, you know. And I think that's causing a lot of people frustration as well and stuff like that.
Yes. So you're asking me my opinion, like what do I think?
You know, just opinion. I mean, you know, I just wonder, you know,
I like what you said, not to cut you off, Kristina, but I like what you said when you say this isn't the real relationship, because that's true to an extent. Or you can look out on the flip side and say,
right,
pose the real relationship.
Yeah.
That's actually where I was going.
Because if y'all not y'all not forced
that's why I asked. That's why I asked.
Yeah, you're not forced to be together 24/7. Now you like, man, this get on my nerves, you know. Go ahead, Kristina. I'm sorry.
No, you're right, Marv. I mean that's a great addition to the thought process. So, I mean, B-Lab is right in that these conditions aren't typical. right? Like they're not typical conditions for a relationship. Most people are not up under each other all day, every day. You know, we are not, we have much more freedom usually. And so these are some adverse conditions that most people's relationships are now being tested by. And, you know, pressure will expose kind of some underlying issues that may already be there. So, just backing up, you know, most relationships, if there are some issues, and, you know, most relationships have some, like some kind of little stuff to always be worked on or improved or whatever. And so, you know, communication is a common one, healthy and appropriate boundaries, even within a relationship and a marriage. Those are very common things to give people trouble. And then also, so each person in the relationship, their capacity to get their inner needs met. Like that's one, when I work with couples, that's a real like something that can drive a wedge between people for real. Like each person gathering the information about how well each person can meet their own inner needs or communicate what they need, you know, because we're all walking around with stuff we need. And so when we're in a relationship with someone else, sometimes we try to get our needs met by that other person, which sometimes is not appropriate, sometimes it is, but all of that can just really make things dicey in the relationship. So then you add on top of some of these potential issues, adverse conditions like a pandemic where you are just stuck, you know. And if you already don't communicate well, guess what's about to happen now that you got to spend more time with someone and you don't communicate well, or you know, you have poor boundaries, or you don't know how to get your needs met, you don't know how to really negotiate that with your partner, and now y'all are like this and you just are struggling. It's more of a struggle, it's a bigger struggle. And so I think what we have seen, um, reportedly, there are lots of relationship issues coming out of this pandemic. Like lots of people breaking up, lots of people potentially getting divorced. Um, and it is hard, Bilal, because you know this, like you said, it's not really the relationship. It's not the normal
Right.
relationship. It's
Right.
really just not normal conditions. And so under normal conditions, people might have more opportunities to avoid dealing with
Yeah.
the stuff, or they might just have more freedom to just not deal with the stuff. And I think the pandemic is making people, uh, you know, forcing the stuff to the forefront. And yeah, I think that's really what it is. Even the couples that I currently counsel, I'm seeing like, well, these issues were actually they were already here. They're just worse now.
Yeah, but you know, before the pandemic, you could go on a fellas trip and
Mm-hmm.
charge, give each other
Yeah.
some space.
Hard.
You know, you can go hang out with the girls. You know, have a spa day or whatever. You could give each other that space. But you know, like
Yeah.
you said, you throw on the pandemic. Some people losing jobs, less money coming in.
Yeah.
Having to educate your children day in and day
Yeah.
out, having to homeschool. That's another stressor. So it's just a lot on marriages. And I'm glad Lab brought that up because that was the
Yeah.
next question, because it's important. I mean, we talk about it often. You know, we're stronger together, black
Mm-hmm.
men and black women. You know,
Yeah.
there's so many narratives and agendas trying to divide us because they know when we are together, we're unstoppable. And
That's a fact.
that segue to my next question.
Yeah.
We saw where there was a lot of, we talked about at the beginning of the show, we talked about the racial unrest, right? How we're not safe as a people. We talk about relationships between men and women. There's been this narrative pushed by some people, and it's their truth, so I'm not trying to argue them down, where they say black women aren't protected by black men. And for me, I always find it somewhat offensive because
Yeah.
of how I regard black women, how the men in my life who I'm associated with, how we regard and treat black women. but I don't want to diminish what those women are saying because that's their truth, right? But I, because I don't want to fall into that all lives matter. It's about, well, it's not all white people, it's not all black men, but you do feel defensive. And what's the best way to handle that? Because you brought up you used a phrase on one of our previous shows. You talked about trauma residue.
Yeah.
And you see so many black women and they're sprinkling their trauma residue from here to there, and it kind of jays their interactions with black men. And some of us just aren't equipped to handle it. You know what I'm saying? We're not equipped to be like, there's a reason why she's acting like this. Can we get to the bottom of it? Can we respect what she's saying? And Rika looking at me crazy. So go ahead, Rika.
How you just gonna say black women the only one doing that? So black men don't do that too?
They do.
They don't have any trauma.
They do, but right now, what's the narrative being pushed though? The narrative being pushed is that black women are protected. Brothers are just saying like, man, we all unsafe. You know what I mean?
That's the narrative that you're responding to because you take offense to it. I've heard both narratives. I've heard that, you know what I mean, black men don't feel supported by black women. That's basically the same argument in inverse. People are just saying that they're not feeling.
I think any brother that says that's an idiot, because black women have had our back 1,000%, even when we didn't deserve it. So that's probably why I'm not even addressing that, because that's so untrue.
But then again, it goes to personal experience. We don't know what that individual has dealt with in their lives. We don't know what their trauma residue is. So, it's an individual thing to bring trauma to a relationship, especially when you don't value counseling and dealing with yourself before you try to be a part of a couple or a union. So I would just say it's not just women sprinkling that in there. I would say it's all people.
And I wasn't necessarily trying to say in terms of relationship. I'm just talking about in terms of our interaction as people, as black people, because you don't just, right now you're just interacting mainly with your spouse or whoever's in your house,
right?
But you interact with people in your community. And, I saw a post on Instagram and this girl just went off. It was about Women's Month. March is Women's Month, right? And she posted about Women's Month. She was like, Happy Women's Month to all the sisters out there. And then she just went in on black men. You black men ain't nothing. You don't support black female businesses. You don't buy nothing from a black female business for your lady. You don't support us. And I was just like, dang, how does something about empowering women go straight to this trashing black men? So it's something that definitely needs to be addressed. And I'm rambling. I want to get our guest to talk, but I hope you get what I'm trying to say.
I do, but I also want to weave in what Erika was saying. And first, let me apologize because earlier I mispronounced your name. I'm sorry. I hate it when people do that, and I forgot that your pronunciation is different. So I wanted to acknowledge that.
That was before we started recording, so you can still apologize.
It was, but I just wanted to do that because that's important. Out of respect, that's important. But I want to weave in what she said. Because she's right. So there are lots of narratives that just float around. And usually these outbursts, even like the Instagram post you're mentioning, Marv, these outbursts come from people's traumatic experiences. And then they just like throw it out there and without any regard to who that affects, who reads it, then they traumatizing somebody else. You know what I mean? And so it just so happened that you saw that post, Marv, and it offended you because of how just a complete contrast to how you feel. But Erika is right. There are lots of men who walk around saying lots of pretty awful things about Black women and our lack of support and respect for them. But really what this comes down to is collective trauma that Black people have experienced. So I think when you ask, Marv, how do we respond to that? Like, how do we deal with it? It's really just trying to keep in mind that everybody's experience is different and they're coming from their own experience-informed perspective, which may not be rooted in fact at all. You know what I mean? So I think acknowledging that it's a dialogue that involves listening to another person's experience, and then also acknowledging that as Black people, and the Black family, the Black family has been the target of so hate and just intentional destruction it's part of the history of Black people in this country. So acknowledging the fact that racism, one of the main goals of racism was to destroy us, the power of the Black family, and to create this dynamic of mistrust between Black men and Black women, and to, just all these things that were done to us for hundreds of years that still impact us. That's trauma residue right there. Like, as progressive as we are, as educated and informed as we are, even the four of us on here, we know that things that have happened to our ancestors and things that have happened to us historically impact us to this day. They inform the way we make decisions, they inform the way we look at each other, and the way that, our goals and our values for our families have to do with what we know has happened in the past, what we're intentionally deciding that we want to be different. So just acknowledging that many Black women maybe have not been protected by the Black men in their lives or in their families. Many people, but many, don't even want to say women, but I think just in using your example, Marv, many Black women have experienced trauma, violence, hurt at the hands of Black men. And so instead of maybe processing that with a professional, like they get to a point where they're like, this is really still with me, and I don't have the tools to shake this. So let me talk to someone who can help me, heal from this and not let this just linger on in my life. They don't even know it's an issue. So they're just walking around making posts, tearing people down because they have been torn down. Like it really, trauma is a very vicious cycle like that. And many times people don't even realize that they have even been traumatized. They just think, well, this is what life is. This is how people do you. So you just gotta, this is how I gotta move now because this is what people do. No, that's trauma. Like, no, it is okay to say, no, this is not real life. And if, you know, I want my life to look different, I can create that for myself by choosing different types of people, by being intentional about the relationships I get in. Like, I don't have to keep experiencing the same stuff over and over. But many people don't know how to navigate out of that. And so I think, Marv, some people's experience is that they have not been supported by certain people, whether it's Black women or it's Black men. Like you said, we can't really invalidate a person's experience, but we know that collectively, most Black men are out here riding for Black women. We know that. We know that most Black women ride for Black men. We know that too, and so I think it's just when people come with that energy, being the informed people that we are, we kind of have to just take a step back and say, okay, this is your stuff coming out right here. So I'm not going to be offended by this because this is not about me. This is all your stuff that you just kind of spewing out all over the place. And so let me listen to you. You clearly have a story and something happened to you. And I'm sorry that happened to you. Sometimes people just really need to hear that. Like, dang, I'm sorry that happened to you. That's awful. I just want to be the Black man that tells you that there are ridiculous amount of Black men that would love to protect and support you. Like, I'm sorry that that was your experience. So I think it's just kind of knowing that it's a conversation. It doesn't necessarily have to be a statement. Statements are kind of final. It's like it has a period at the end. There's nothing else that comes after that, but a conversation is ongoing. So when you see stuff like that, position yourself for a conversation. Like, okay, this person got some stuff, this ain't about me at all. This is their stuff.
Right.
Sometimes when I see posts like the one that Marv brought up, it triggers something else in me because I think that there is a large population of people going back to the stress of the pandemic who have been misdirected by social media or whatever into thinking that entrepreneurship is easy. So
Mm.
then when you realize that it's not easy and your whole family didn't just come make you a millionaire by buying up all your stuff on the first day, then this fear sets in. And then so when I see posts like that, I'm like, how many black men did you think was going to buy your weave or or your lashes or your makeup line? Like, you have to do market research. You have to know who you're selling to. And so for a large portion of the businesses that I see black women starting, it's not really marketed towards black men. So then you can't say, hey, I sell hair, but black men don't support my business. Well, no, they probably don't. And so then I
Get
think, yeah, but I think that goes back to fear. And so I try to recognize fear in other people. And I don't know if that's something that you have to help people get to the bottom of. That's something that I've had to point out in myself in counseling when I was going through my processes and stuff, how much of what I was doing circled back to my own personal fear about a situation. Like you said, that's your own stuff coming out. But I think that I would like to know what you think about how much people's fear, underlying fear of, not having enough money, not having resources, not having support comes out as an attack against people who don't deserve it.
Yeah, like most of the time when you are right on. Most of the time when there is an attack or you see these inflammatory posts or statuses where people are just going in on somebody else, it's usually fear or pain, like hurt, unresolved pain. Like so many of us are walking around with, I mean, I walk around with unresolved pain. I try my best to work through many of the things, but there are things that still bother me, things that trigger me all the time. And I try to catch it before I lash out at somebody else, but sometimes people are just so unaware. They just don't even realize or they're in denial that they're still hurting about something. So they're walking around like, that don't bother me, that I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. No, you're not. Like, you are not fine. So I think fear, pain, unresolved pain, that's usually what underlies anger is fear and being hurt.
Kristina, I'm gonna go ahead and call her. I'm gonna throw it out there. Dr. Jones just said is really something, we kind of repress a lot, and a lot of times you'll see it come to the forefront, when somebody, that person that they have these feelings towards, like maybe they pass away unexpectedly and stuff like
Mm.
that. And man, I mean, I know we've all seen that part, and they can never get that back. So I try to, nip stuff in the bud with people I have issues with pretty immediately. And I'm just throwing that out there for people too, man. That stuff can fester and eat, just eat away at you, man. And next thing you know, somebody passes. This last year, it seems like we've all been close to many people who've lost a lot of people. And a lot of them had unresolved issues with those people in their family. And, who knows how that's going to affect them going forward because they never address that. And that's something else I think we need to address.
You're right. You're right. Grief on its own is rough, and ongoing. I don't even think you ever really stop grieving. I think grief just changes the way it looks over time. But when you suffer a loss, especially of a person, you that it always affects you. Like no matter how much time has passed, you always miss that person. Every now and then you feel sadness. It may not be as much as in the beginning, but grief is just something that always is with you, and just changes shape. But for sure, unresolved things complicates grief. It makes it so much harder. And it is possible to resolve things that you've held on to even after someone is gone. Even if you have not been able to resolve it with them before they pass, it is still possible to resolve things for yourself and work, heal, gain the closure that you need, even if that other person is not present and you're not able to, talk to them. There are still things that you can do. And some people find ways to do that on their own. I always highly recommend working with a counselor during difficult grief. It's just very beneficial to have somebody companion you through that experience. It's a lot of loneliness and grief. And so, doing that with someone who's trained to be there with you through that and help you work through some unresolved stuff is really important. I'm glad you brought that up because that is another thing that this pandemic brought that was just really tragic was a lot of loss. A lot of loss of people, of jobs, of resources, just a lot of loss.
Relationships. I mean,
Hmm.
I'll tell you, one of the breakthroughs I made before we wrap up the show was, I've dealt with a lot of grief. I've lost both my parents, and throughout this pandemic. So before the pandemic, I was walking around bottled up, right? And I kept telling myself, like, I just need to get a good cry out. But I hated to cry because I hated how I sounded when I cried. That macho, I like, man, I sound like I sound like when I cry. But this pandemic, man, this became overwhelming, and I finally was able to break through. And it was Mother's Day, and I was, my mom's been gone for almost 15 years. And on Mother's Day, it hit me hard, hit me real hard. And I didn't fight it, and I let it go, and I was exhausted afterwards. But I felt so much better. All that stuff that was pent up, it was like a release. It was cathartic, and I let it out. And then other things happened throughout the year, stuff with my kids, stuff with my brother being very sick. And I saw where I was able just to let it go. And like Lav said, don't let it fester. I didn't let those negative feelings, that sadness, I just let it go, cried it out, and then say, okay, what are we going to do next? And it was so much better. And I think that's something that we could talk for hours. That's something that a lot of our brothers need to do, because when you talk about this pandemic, and I read this article where men, our generation, me and Lav's age, we're dying. We're dying in large numbers, and it's COVID. But we're not as prepared to deal with COVID because of the obvious things, hypertension, diabetes, things like that. But that stress that we carry all the time, being the breadwinner, um, dealing with racism, all the stuff that we talked about in the show, the marriage dynamics, all that stuff that John Henry, not my therapist said, don't call it Superman, it's called it John Henry. John Henry was a brother who tried to beat the train and he worked himself to death. There's so many of us who have that John Henry syndrome that is killing us. So I hope that with this show, I mean, like I said, we're gonna have you back. I hope that people can reach a place of love, because Rika talked about fear. And in my therapy sessions, I learned that the opposite thing of love is fear. I used to think it was hate, but really it's fear. So I'm hoping that we can get past that fear and into a place of love where we love one another and we love ourselves, so we can be more productive as a community. So I appreciate you. I love having you on the show. Tell people where they can find you.
Well, thanks again for having me. I can be found on Instagram at More Grace Counseling. I can also be found on Facebook at More Grace Counseling and Mediation Services. I don't do very many mediations, but I am also a trained mediator. Mostly just do counseling, but I can be found at www.moregracecounseling.com.
And for people in the state of Missouri, they don't have to be in
Yes.
the Kansas City area. They can contact you for services, correct? They can do virtual services, right?
Yep, absolutely. So right now I don't currently have any openings. So I just want to say that because I think that's important. I don't want anyone to have any
Get on that wait list. Get on that wait.
but yes, and also what started to happen during the pandemic is Black counselors in the Kansas City area, we are collaborating more, we are working together more, we are referring people to each other. So if someone reaches out to me and I'm full, then I get them directly in contact with another Black therapist that has availability. So I don't want to discourage anyone from reaching out to me, even though I'm currently full. I can help you find someone else. So please still reach out to me. I am doing services virtually, so anyone in the state of Missouri I can serve, and I'm recently licensed in Kansas. So if you're in the state of Kansas, I can also provide services to you virtually.
Okay. All right. Well, make sure y'all reach out to, like I'm doing like Lav, Dr. Kristina Jones.
I appreciate that. I claim
Yeah,
that. I receive it.
exactly. I'm throwing it out there, right?
We're gonna speak it into existence, and everybody, please make sure you follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Man Listen Show. If you want to donate to the show, you can hit us on Cash App, $ Man Listen Show, and make sure you share the show. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube. We really need to get that subscribers up. We need to get that subscriber numbers up. We should be well into the 500s. We're gonna speak that into existence. So share this with your people. We got a lot of good content, a lot of good people. And we just need to spread the word, spread that love so we get past that fear into the love. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and holler at you next time. Peace.
Peace.